There's been very little done on the enforcement level inside the United States, even though there's very good federal legislation that came into place about the year 2000. There was 91 cases last year prosecuted in all the United States. Now, if you think about the fact that there's anywhere between 100,000 and 200,000 enslaved people, every year a new 17,500 come into the United States, trafficked in. 91 cases is not much. So I went to police chiefs and I interviewed them, saying, why is this happening? Why isn't there more enforcement? And they said, frankly, two things. One, there's only been federal legislation. There hasn't been state legislation. They'll leave it up to the FBI, the INS, or whoever, ICE, to do the enforcement if it's not state law or local law. So abolitionists this last year have really been working towards a state legislation. In California, we have a new state legislation, which is great news. And so that's one. The other is they say it's invisible. Witnesses don't come forward, victims don't come forward, nor do our police officers really look for it. We'll go to a home, there might be a woman beat up, and maybe we'll talk about domestic violence, but we don't look for actually the possibility that woman might be here against her will. So that there is a grant from the Department of Justice for local police departments to get training on it, signs to look for. And that's happening. So I guess I'm very upbeat that that's going to change this year. But I think what needs to happen is citizen kind of commitment to say, we want to know why there's not more being done. And that's why I want projects like the University of San Francisco to replicate in universities all over the country.
Good morning. Approximately 6.5 billion people on the planet, approximately 1 billion people own the privately held pieces of the earth. 1 in or 4 in 5 human beings are in fact slaves in the sense that they're having to pay rent merely to occupy the planet. Erase in your mind all of the infrastructure and the surface of the earth itself, the private bits of it, are owned by 1/5 of the planet. So I'm wondering if this plays into the slave trade justice, yes.
Well, definitely it's a matter of justice. As Sam Brownback said in the Senate in an evaluation of this, he said the problem is that we have a glut of supply of human beings who are vulnerable to be trafficked. It's a glut of supply. And so it's addressing that issue. You know, it is kind of general. People all over the globe are forced to work under terrible conditions, and they make desperate choices. Yes, it's a relative step from, say, working in a sweatshop in China or against being forced to work someone's labor. But I'm really kind of focusing in with this campaign. No one should be forced. No one should be for sale, literally for sale, that you're taken from your home and now forced to do someone else's labor. That's slavery. Once we eradicate and once we deal with that, let's not ignore the fact that people every day are making other kinds of desperate choices that put them into situations of abject poverty.
So there's a difference between a sweatshop and a slavery shop.
I call it slave shop and sweatshop.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're both bad, but we
Yes.
do one.
Professor Batstone, some years ago on a cold winter night, I was waiting for a tram in Vienna. And there was a woman, and she smiled at me, and I said something to her, and I said, "Isn't it cold?" And she didn't understand. She spoke no German. And then I noticed that in the same stop, there would be more and more increasing, and obviously it became a trade. Then, this stayed in my mind because a man came to me and said to me, "Why are you polite to her?" And I said, "Because she's a lady." Then I noticed the same thing in Munich and in November in Istanbul. More and more women are brought with this mirage of a new possibility of profession or education to not just to the West, to Turkey. And so I quickly recognized that if there was a supply, it's because there is a demand. Now, I would say, how can we possibly change the market so that there is not that possibility?
Thank you very much. It's a very important set of comments. And I traveled 5 continents this last year. And found an unbelievable network of moving girls from, say, Eastern Europe to Bangkok, and then girls from Ukraine on the streets of Bangkok. It's really a globalized movement where a nightclub owner in Chicago can pick up the phone. It's almost like Dell. You mail order 2 girls, and then the traffickers go out and find them. Right? It's almost like you want to order your computer. Tell me what kind of things you want, and then I'll go find them and then bring them. Yes, it's part of it is this demand, and it's front page or the sports page of the Chronicle. It's getting beyond this glamorized kind of view of wow, isn't this exciting? And these girls are fantastic. And this friend from Italy said, oh man, I went to this club last night. The women were just gorgeous from Russia. And I said, do you realize where they came from? How they got there? What's the process? I want to make sure by the end of 2007, no one can say I didn't know. Today we can say I didn't know. Because really, I think it is something that I think people are shocked by. But by the end of 2007, I want them to say, I didn't know to, I had to make a moral choice. It's a different thing. You know where that girl came from at that club? Do you still want to frequent and support that? That's the demand side.
I think the hardest part was we can free them, but then there's the issue that it is so desperate. And so when they're freed, we're helping contribute to different groups that are freeing them. They can still turn and be subject to being bought again because they don't have anywhere to go or anywhere to work, and their family is the one that sold them. So what kinds of examples or how can we address that as well of them not getting back into it after being enslaved?
That's really critical because I think there's some Christian groups, churches, in all good faith, all good intention, have kind of raised money out of their programs to buy girls out of slavery, to pay off a rug loom owner or a brothel owner, buy the girl. But the thing is that what you're really doing is creating another market called the church market and redemption for buying slaves. And then you go out and buy new ones, right? So that there's 2 kind of very strategic things that we're doing in the movement and working with groups on the front line. One is the kind of investigation and documentation that we can take to honest legal authorities, which are sometimes hard to find in countries, but they are usually always there to shut down an establishment rather than simply work on freeing those individuals. The second thing, really important, is that we're creating a kind of a livelihood for those who are freed. We set up, for instance, we're working in Cambodia, a clothes design place where women who've been emancipated now can make handbags, shirts, different companies, a catering company, setting up potential beyond the trafficking. Nicholas Kristof has done some great work exposing what's going on with this trafficking, and he even bought 2 girls out of slavery, but then he left them, and then he goes back and says, gee, I'm so shocked what happened. Well, if there's no provision made for them, and I don't want to bust his chops, but really, unless there's some kind of thoughtful emancipation program, then we're really not dealing with kind of the root cause. So it's really creating an infrastructure. That's why we want to create these mini enterprises, so that women and children who are free have some place to go, a livelihood. You're doing them an injustice just to free them to throw them out in the street and say, you're free. They go, I am.
You talked about awareness in your prior question. I had lunch yesterday, ironically enough, with 3 very intelligent friends, and when I spoke to them about what I was doing this morning, they looked at me almost drop-jawed, like human trafficking, slavery in North America, unfathomable. You talked about the Department of Justice grant to educate the police force, your book, I can't wait to read it. What else is being done to create a greater level of awareness in North America around this issue? Because I think it's definitely lacking.
Thank you very much. And this started as a book. I thought it was an interesting book. My problem as I'm a curious person, I could write probably 15 different books. I need someone to tell me this book you should write. Fortunately, I had Mark Tauber, he was my agent, now he's the head barber. He said, Dave, this is the book you need to write. But as I got into it, I thought, this isn't a book, this is a calling. People don't know about this. And, I resigned from Sojourner, so full time I could work on trying to get this word out. So yeah, we're having a concert to end slavery. T-Bone Burnett, who wrote Walk the Line and Oh Brother, Wherefore Art Thou, great